Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we'll be checking out the GPD XD, and yes, that is an emoji face. So if you were wondering, just like me, yes, the name is basically an emoji face. There you go. But at least it's a good emoji face, right? Yeah? No? Okay. So here's the box. It's pretty simple and straightforward. If you take a look at the back here, we get some inspiring quotes here. And if we open it up, we have a rubber pad, and the GPD is actually right here. I've already unboxed it, as you can see. And we get a cool information guide that I don't understand. We get a really nice micro USB cable, very high quality, wrappings and whatever, and a 5V 2 amp charger, which is pretty good. And of course, the warranty sheet in English, which is important. And that's it. That's pretty much it. And yes, this box is actually pretty cool. So it's pretty simple. It's magnetic. And it's worth keeping if you're going to be storing this thing for a long time. And of course, some of you are going to say that this reminds you of the GPD Win as well as the Nintendo DS series. And yeah, it does. So that's the GPD XD right there. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look around it first. So the top here is a very glossy finish, and it is a fingerprint magnet, as you can see here. I mean, it's impossible to keep this thing clean. It's pretty insane. You can see that this thing inside and out is a fingerprint magnet. Doesn't matter where you touch it, it's gonna have fingerprints on it. But that's fine. That's handhelds for you. So yeah, anyways, the top here is a nice glossy finish. Looks pretty nice. And checking on the back here, we got a bunch of things. So we got R1, R2, L1, L2. We got a micro SD card slot. You got a micro USB charging port, as well as a mini HDMI port and a headphone jack. And check out the bottom here, we got 4 screw holes, as well as 4 feet here, as well as the label and some information. This is the 32GB edition. Gearbest has the black and red editions of this thing. The black one has 32 gigs, and the red one has 64 gigs. And that's how it is. So, and anyway, so taking a look at the front here, we got a microphone port, it seems, as well as 2 wristband connection areas, which is pretty cool. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the outside. Let's take a look inside, which is where all the good stuff is. And you can see there are a lot of things, a lot of buttons, a lot of things going on here, and we're going to get into all of that. So first of all, as you can see, we have dual analog sticks, which do feel nice. And yes, they are very similar to the GPD Win, as well as the PS Vita, which I'll show you in just a bit here. And they feel pretty decent. And over here we have L3 and R3, which is pretty interesting. Volume controls are over here, power button right in the center, an Android menu button, so that's where you select and close programs out. And then we have this really awesome button right here, and that is the biggest feature of this thing. And we'll get to that in just a bit here. But anyways, we have a D-pad that feels pretty good, and I do find it better than the GPD Win one, even though they are very, very similar. It just has more depth into it. And then we have the buttons right here, which are double labeled, so you have the Xbox as well as the PlayStation buttons configuration, in case you don't know them. And on the bottom here, we have Start and Select, Back, and Home. And get this, dual front stereo speakers, which is pretty awesome, and I find that a very awesome feature. And they actually do sound pretty good, and I did find myself watching more videos on it than my G4 phone, which has a much better mono speaker. But I did have a much more enjoyable time watching YouTube videos on this thing, thanks to those front audio speakers, as well as its position on how it stands on its own. I found it to be a very nice bedside console, as well as a YouTube watching machine. But with that said, let's go ahead and take a look inside. But first, let's take a look at the display here, and what we have is a 720p IPS touch display, and it can get pretty bright. So let's go ahead and drop the brightness a bit down here, so we can compensate for a camera. And that's what it looks like on the inside. It's basically running an Android system with a custom launcher, and you'll see you do have the option to change up the launcher to Google Now, or Nova Launcher, or whatever launcher you want. It's an Android system, you can do whatever you want on it. And yes, it does come rooted right out of the box. And yeah, let's take a look inside. Alright, so the first thing you're going to see here is the emulation section. And under the emulation section, you'll find a couple things. First of all, you'll be on the download tab. And under the download tab, you'll have Happy Chick and KO Gamebox to download games from. And basically, both of them have a ton of games. But to simplify everything, let's take a look at Happy Chick here. And basically, Happy Chick allows you to download and play games on this device. And it even has online features for some fighting games like King of Fighters, Super Street Fighter, and whatnot. That said, if we go ahead and click on the category section, you'll be brought to a nice selection of platforms they can download games from, and there are a ton of them, and overall it is a really nice collection, and you can just easily click on the game you want, download it, and it will automatically download to your device. And it even has some Android games that they can download as well. You can see it's a pretty impressive list. You got MAME, you got Arcade, Dreamcast, PlayStation, Nintendo DS, N64, and overall a pretty nice selection. But of course, once you start playing, you're not going to be stuck in the vertical mode, obviously. It's going to be in landscape. And you can actually install Happy Chick on your phone and try it out. And if you go to KO Box, this is where you'll find your PSP games, and it has a huge selection and a very nice layout and interface to download games. So you can choose from the hot category, or you can actually go to categories themselves and download them from here. So for example, if you want, let's go to action, and we'll find a huge list that is very nicely laid out of PSP games. They can easily just go ahead and click on them and download them from here. And just like that, you get a bunch of options to download from, which is pretty awesome. And after that, after downloading whatever you want, you can go to PPSPP, and that's the PSP emulator, and play your PSP games. That said, not all PSP games are going to run perfectly on this emulator, especially on this kind of device. You'll have to do some experimenting and do some online research on what games work for this thing. But that said, stay tuned for the next video. We'll have a nice selection of games that I found to work with this thing, and do my final review, and pretty much compare it to the other devices that I'll show you guys in just a bit here. And over here, there's something that I wish that was taken out, and that would be this tutorial menu on how to download more games and where to put them and whatnot. But it's there. Oh well. Next, you have the arcade section, and it has some preloaded games. Yes, this thing has some preloaded games, including Android games. And pretty much everything you see here is preloaded on this thing, which is awesome. So right out of the box, you can enjoy this thing right away. And that said, this thing did come in 100% battery life, which was pretty awesome. And believe it or not, I'm still trying to drain the battery. It is at 44% now. And it's been like a week now since I had this thing trying to drain the battery. I've been watching YouTube videos on it, playing some games on it, testing it out, and just pretty much trying to see how long the battery will last. That said, I did some research, and apparently people are getting 8 to 10 hours of battery life on this thing of retro gaming without Wi-Fi. And that's pretty amazing. I mean, 8 to 10 hours of retro gaming on this thing sounds like a good deal, I gotta say. So this game is preloaded, and it works pretty well on the Dreamcast. I'll show you guys in just a bit here. Also, Crash Bandicoot, I'll show you that as well. It plays perfectly fine on this thing. And yeah, those are the preloaded games. And this is the list of platforms that you can choose from right now. And I'm going to find out how we can add more systems to show up on this list. If you want to add more games, you can go to the file directory right here that it says in the bottom right corner and put the games in there manually if you want. But yeah, it's nice that it's preloaded with games and apps that allow you to download games very easily and not having to plug in your PC. And next up we have the Games tab, and this is where you actually put your Android games on it. And basically games, once you download them, they'll come up on the application section, and they can hold and click and move them to the Games tab right here. Or section, should I say. And most of these games are preloaded all the way up until this section right here. I've downloaded all these games right here, including Minecraft, and they all seem to work pretty fine. Moving on, you have applications, and that's obviously where things get downloaded, and it does come with a ton of preloaded apps. That said, it did come with Aptoide, which I like to call the black market of Android. You can pretty much get free Android apps and games on it. There was Netflix installed and Hulu and whatnot, MX Player Pro, and it did come with the Play Store pre-installed, which is good. And if you want to uninstall any of the preloaded apps, you can easily do that without even having to use the root, which this thing does have. So if there's something you can't take out, you can easily use root and brute force it out. And that is it. So far there's no system update, but there's one thing that you could do to this thing, and that would be installing the legacy ROM that is custom made. It is a custom ROM, and it is cleared from all bloatware, and it should add some more performance to your device, and it does also allow you to overclock or underclock or do whatever you want to your device here. And finally we have settings, and here are some quick toggles right here. If you want to go into detail, you can go to advanced settings right there, and you can have your usual Android settings section. And you can go to home here and actually just switch out your home launcher, and then you'll be back into a good old regular home launcher, just like that. Very easy and simple. And or just install Google Now or whatever you want. And of course this is Android, so you have your notification menu and the settings menu right here, very easily accessed, and that is it. So let's go ahead and play some games and see how this thing does. And one last thing, remember that joystick button that was right over here? If you click that anywhere on the system, doesn't matter what game or app you're on, you can click that and it will toggle this menu on. And it is pretty awesome. And basically this menu will allow you to map these controls to whatever touchscreen controls there are on the game. Doesn't matter if the game has controller support, it can easily emulate that using this menu, and you can move it around, and it's pretty awesome. And you can just do a lot of things here and configure them. You can add more functions, you can change them, and it's really, really awesome. So for example, I have the arrow keys for this one right here. I have them mapped right here. And whenever I click those, it will click the buttons on the screen itself. And I have look around on the joystick over here, so we can move that around as well, which is pretty cool. And yeah, that's the killer feature of this thing. It is really awesome, especially if you want to play Android games and those games don't support controllers. And overall, it's a pretty awesome function that is built in right into this thing, and that would allow you to do whatever you want on the screen using the control pad here. And yeah, it's just really nice to have that. And that's what makes this thing unique over using a phone when playing Android games or emulator games or whatever. It has a built-in controller, so there you go. Oh look, what's this? A PSP interface? Nope, it's just actually a front end as well as an emulation platform called RetroRage that recently has finally been released for Android, and that is really exciting. And not only it has a very nice menu system and it looks beautiful just like the PSP or PlayStation 3, it is very silky smooth. It has a ton of functions and configurations they could do, and it's just really easy to use. So this is going to be my main emulation platform on this device. Alright, so those were just a few games that we have tested out on this thing, and they all played very, very nicely, especially retro games. Heavy Android games like Asphalt 8 are going to struggle a bit. You want to drop it to low settings, just like I did here. And it was still playable with very good visuals. That said, lightweight casual games are going to play just fine on this thing. You can do NVIDIA stream on this thing if you want, if you have a good internet connection. This doesn't support 5 GHz network, unfortunately, so unless you have a really good connection, then you can do that. But I will be testing that in the next video. That said, let's finally go ahead and compare it to other consoles. And we're going to start off with the GPD Win right here. So you can see the size comparison here, and they are almost the exact same dimensions. Just one is more rounder than the other, and that would be the GPD Win. Now weight-wise, the GPD Win does feel a bit heavier, and it does feel much nicer in the hand. Especially with those controls, which I'll be talking about just over here. And that's what they look like side by side, and you can see what they look like. Yeah, the GPD Win does have a much nicer hinge. It's much cleaner. That said, the GPD XD, it has settings that you can set it at. So you have this one, and you have that one, and then you have that one, and then you can micro adjust it in between them with those clicks. Here's what they look like in the back, and yeah, that's pretty much it for these two guys. And if you don't have any of these guys, here's what it looks like compared to the PSP, and that is what it is. And here's the PSP sitting inside of it, and I just realized that it's actually bigger than the PSP by a lot. Drive off with it. That's pretty cool. That's the PSP. Here's my LG G4 phone. Once again, so you imagine two G4 phones that are 5.5 inches sitting like that, and then you can imagine how big it is. Here's the GPD Pocket. You can see how big it is. Now, it's the other way around. The GPD Pocket can't take the XD for a ride, so there it goes. And finally, here we have a PS Vita, and you can see the size comparisons right there. And here's the analog sticks right here. You can see how big they are compared to the PS Vita, as well as the GPD Win. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the size comparisons. Let's go ahead and talk about the things that I find missing on this thing, or things that you should know about, and my thoughts about it. And this video is the initial review, so stay tuned for the full review while I'll have less boring details and more important stuff in the video. So the first thing I noticed about this thing is the joysticks. I would have liked it to be right around here instead of these buttons. If these sticks were right here, it would have made this thing that much better. That said, they probably couldn't do that because the battery is probably in the center somewhere here. Now that's one minor thing that I wish was done, just swap out the buttons right here. I'm saying that because I was used to the GPD Win, which had a much nicer, more natural ergonomic joysticks. And they're right in there, and you can easily access all of them. Another thing is this thing does not have Wi-Fi 5 GHz, and it does not have Bluetooth at all. So if you want to play this with a controller, the only option is probably OTG, and I'm not too sure if it accepts OTG. I'll let you guys know. But that said, if you want to add an extra controller, you cannot do that. And if you want to stream video or something from a computer with 5 GHz network, you cannot do that as well. And that is because this thing was made 2 years ago, and it was meant for emulation, and it does that very, very well. So really, if you were looking for an emulation device, you're probably looking at the PSP here, or your phone with a joystick combination thing that you gotta hook up to it. So for the price, this makes more sense, because you can hook up YouTube, you can install apps, you can play games, you can browse the internet, you can configure things, you're not just stuck to PSP and emulators. With this one, you're mostly offline. With this one, you can get way more function than a PSP if you were just looking for a portable emulation console. So you can see where GPD got their GPD Win device ideas from. They made this a while ago, and they came up with the Windows version. So this is the Android version if you want emulation. This is the Windows version if you want emulation. This one runs Windows 10, and this one runs Android 4.4.4. This one can play Android games. This one cannot. This one can play PC games. This one cannot. And that is it. So it's your choice. This is obviously a much cheaper option if you're looking for emulation and casual Android games and whatnot, and it makes for a very nice bedside console, especially for watching videos and playing games. And that is pretty much it for this initial review. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this, and stay tuned for the next video. So take care, everyone.